Our learning intention for today is to tune into a specific part of the spelling inquiry. Our success criteria is to identify interesting words, describe the impact of one interesting word, analyze the word using a spelling inquiry, and transfer your understanding of the word into a sentence. So I've chosen to analyze a poem from your reading lessons. I'm going to read the poem, talk about the interesting words I've identified, and then model to you the learning intention of tuning into a specific part of the spelling inquiry. Here we go. I move along the page like the snout of a strange animal, shaped like a human arm and dressed in the sleeve of a loose green sweater. I sniff the paper ceaselessly, intent as any forager that has nothing on its mind, but that grabs an insect that will allow it to live another day, only to be here tomorrow, dressed perhaps in the sleeve of a plaid shirt, nose pressed against the page, writing a few more dutiful lines, while I gaze out the window and imagine Budapest or some other city where I have never been. So as you can see, I underlined some words that I find interesting. That this doesn't mean these are the only interesting words in the poem. You might have different words, and that's completely fine because this is really personal to you. So I'm going to really focus on one word to complete my spelling inquiry on. And I'm really interested in knowing more about the word forager. And that is why it's really important when you complete a spelling inquiry, you do it on a word that you're genuinely interested in. Otherwise, it's not going to be engaging for you. So I'm going to read the sentence again and try and understand what that means. Intent as any forager that has nothing on its mind. So my very first part of the spelling inquiry is to look into the definition of the word. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. Now, what's really important is that you don't spend a very long time on your spelling inquiry, but at the same time, you don't spend very little time on your spelling inquiry. So what I would do if I were you is I'll probably set myself a 15-minute timer to make sure that is the only amount of time I use for this. Because what we really want to start discouraging is that you think of a spelling inquiry as a checklist. We don't want you guys to just go through all the different parts of the spelling inquiry and stress about getting it all completed. Because if we think about the word inquiry, to inquire into something, it means to research and to understand. So if you're simply just going through the checklist, you're not exactly researching the word with understanding. You're just ticking off different parts of the spelling inquiry. So what I'm saying is it's okay not to do all of the different parts. Okay, so the word is forager. Forager meaning a person or an animal that searches widely for food or provisions. So it's a person or an animal that searches for food. So now I'm going to go back to my poem and I'm going to read that part again and see if I actually understand the poem better. Because again, that is the whole point of the spelling inquiry. It's to help you understand the meaning of poems, texts much better. Intent as any forager that has nothing on its mind. So I sniff the paper ceaselessly, intent as any forager that has nothing on its mind. So obviously what's happening here is the author's using a metaphor to describe their action and compare their action to an animal that searches widely for food. Okay, I'm someone that's also interested in the history of words. So I'm going to go ahead and research the etymology. So forager etymology. Okay, so obviously Google is giving me the etymology for the word forage, and that is because forage is the root word of the word forager. So it has a German background, then it was turned into Old French, meaning fure, maybe, I'm not sure if that's correct pronunciation. Then it became forager, and then fodder into forage. So it's quite interesting that the word straw comes up into the Old French translation. So this is not enough for me. I'm really more curious. I'm going to actually click on a website that will hopefully give me more information about this word. Okay, so now what I'm learning here is that the word forage can be a noun and can also be a verb. So if it's used as a noun, it's food for horses and cattle. But if it's used as a verb, it means to hunt or to look for. So now I'm going to go back to my spelling inquiry poem and ask myself, well, which one is it? Is this a noun or is it a verb? And I can comfortably say that this is a verb because it's saying intent as any forager that has nothing on its mind. Okay. Now, the only other thing that I'm quite interested in, obviously this word has a suffix, so it's the suffix er. And I just would like to know more about the effect of the er suffix. So er suffix meaning. So let's have a look. This is a .org website, so it's a reliable one. It's a list of words ending with the suffix er meaning more or action or process or a person who does an action. So what this is telling me is that the er suffix can have few different impacts on a root word. So it could mean more, so bigger, stronger. It can also mean an action or process. Let's have a look at that example. I wonder what it means by an action or process. I come back to that one. And then a person who does an action. So lawmaker, officer, advertiser, commander. So if we go back to our poem, this now makes sense because forage, the word forage, so the word forage is a verb which means to widely look for food. And a forager is then a person who performs that action. So a forager is a person or an animal that searches widely for food or provisions. So what this means is that when we add the er suffix to a verb, it then becomes a noun of a person that performs that action. I'm now quite interested in knowing more about the impact of suffixes on root words. So I'm going to continue researching about that because that is what I've decided to tune into. Okay, so I want you guys to have a similar type of mentality when you are choosing what it is that you're tuning into for your own spelling inquiry. And with your task, once you complete your spelling inquiry, you need to have a go at using your chosen word in an interesting or an unusual way. So it's not just to be able to use it in a sentence, but rather we want to capture what the author has done and the way they've used the word and be able to transfer that to our own writing. And then I want you to think, well, how might you transfer this learning into poetry writing? Okay, I look forward to seeing what you end up with.